Years passed, and the little farmhouse changed in ways no one outside could have imagined. To the neighbors, it was still just Daniel's farm, a quiet place on the edge of town. But inside, it was no longer the house of a lonely man. It had become a home filled with life, laughter, and a family that should never have existed, but somehow did. Lyra grew quickly. Her once small, trembling hands became steady and strong. She ran through the fields with ease, her silver eyes shining with confidence. She learned Earth's ways, speaking English fluently, helping Daniel with chores, laughing at his jokes. At the same time, she carried the gifts of her true people. Serenia taught her the songs of the stars, the wisdom of light, and the stories of their people scattered across galaxies. Daniel often stood back and watched in quiet amazement. He would see Lyra sitting between them, sketching pictures of both dragons and starships in her notebook, and he realized something. She was not divided between two worlds. She was building a bridge between them. But even with joy, Daniel still feared. Sometimes at night, when the house was still, he would wonder how long this would last. Would Serenia one day be called back to the stars? Would she take Lyra with her? The thought of losing his daughter still weighed heavy on his chest. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch, Daniel finally voiced the fear that had haunted him for years. "You'll leave one day," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon, "both of you, and I'll be alone again." Serenia turned to him, her expression soft. "Daniel, I crossed stars to find my daughter. I could have taken her the moment I arrived, but I stayed. Do you not see? I chose this life with her and with you." Her words sank into him like light breaking through clouds. He glanced at her, and for the first time, he allowed himself to believe it. She wasn't just visiting. She wasn't waiting for the right moment to leave. She was home too. Lyra, sitting between them, grabbed both their hands tightly. "We're a family," she said with the certainty of youth. "No one is leaving." Daniel squeezed her hand, tears stinging his eyes. He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. The seasons rolled on. In spring, they planted together. In summer, they worked the fields. In autumn, they gathered under the orange trees, laughing as they carried baskets full of apples. In winter, they sat by the fireplace, Serenia singing soft songs in her own tongue, while Daniel read old fairy tales. The farmhouse itself changed too. Daniel added a third chair to the porch, built a new table long enough for three, and painted the walls with colors Lyra chose. Drawings covered the fridge, not just of one parent and child, but of three figures standing together under stars and suns. Sometimes Daniel would catch himself staring at them both, his chest full of something too big for words. He thought of the man he used to be, only broken, waiting for life to simply end. And he thought of the man he had become, father, a partner, someone who had built a family out of the impossible. One night, as the stars glittered above, and the crickets sang, Daniel sat outside with a cup of coffee. Serenia joined him, her silver hair catching the moonlight. Lyra was already asleep inside, her dreams no doubt filled with both dragons and galaxies. "You know," Daniel said softly, "I never thought I'd get a second chance at life, but somehow, I did." Serenia looked at him, her eyes gentle. "Humans always surprise me. You gave love without asking what she was, without fear of what it might cost. That is rare, even among the stars." Daniel smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for the stars. I did it because she needed me." Serenia reached over and touched his hand. "And in doing so, you gave me back my child. You gave me a family too." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the night wrapping around them. Above, the stars shone as if they were listening. Years ago, Daniel had walked into the woods and found a child who wasn't his. He had carried her home, not knowing that he was carrying his own future. And now, he sat with a daughter, and a woman who had once been strangers but had become the two people he loved most. The story was not ending. It was only beginning. And perhaps, Daniel thought, as he looked up at the stars, that was the most human thing of all, to take the broken, the unexpected, and the impossible, and turn it into family. The days after the choice felt different. The heavy silence that once filled the house began to lift, replaced by something gentler. It was not easy. 3 lives had suddenly been tied together, each from a different world. But slowly, they began to find a rhythm. Serena did not leave. She stayed in the small guest room, though she hardly needed rest the way humans did. At first, she was awkward in the house, unsure of where things were kept, or how the simplest human tools worked. She looked at the stove as if it were a puzzle, and the washing machine frightened her the first time it shook loudly. Lyra giggled at her mother's confusion, while Daniel tried, with surprising patience, to explain. You put the clothes in here, soap goes here, and it just does its thing, Daniel said with a shrug. Serena frowned, studying the machine. It is loud, Daniel chuckled. Yeah, welcome to Earth. Despite the differences, Serena adapted quickly. She was curious, graceful, and eager to learn. She began helping Daniel with the farm, moving with a strength that startled him. She could lift heavy sacks of feed with ease, and she handled animals with a gentleness they seemed to sense. Lyra loved it most of all. She would run between them, her laughter bright as she watched her 2 parents, one from Earth, one from the stars, working side by side. Evenings became something new. Daniel would sit on the porch as he always had, but now Lyra sat between him and Serena, swinging her feet as she listened to their stories. Daniel told old Earth tales, knights, dragons, heroes of legend. Serena shared stories of the stars, of glowing cities floating among planets, of music made from light. Lyra's eyes shone brighter than ever. I want to see both, she said one night. The dragons and the stars. Daniel ruffled her hair. Well, kiddo, you already got both right here. Serena smiled, her gaze softening as she looked at him. For the first time, she no longer saw him as someone she might lose her child to, but as someone she could share her child with. Still, not everything was smooth. There were moments of tension, times when Serena struggled to understand Earth's ways, or when Daniel felt the weight of being compared to someone so extraordinary. One afternoon, when Lyra scraped her knee, running in the yard, Daniel rushed to help, but Serena placed her glowing hand over the wound, healing it instantly. Daniel stepped back, feeling strangely useless. Serena noticed the look on his face. That evening, when Lyra was asleep, she found him sitting alone on the porch. You feel small beside me, she said softly. Daniel didn't deny it. You can do things I never could. Heal her wounds, protect her in ways I can't. Sometimes I wonder if she even needs me anymore. Serena shook her head firmly. Do not think that. You gave her love when I was gone. You gave her a life. She needs that more than power. She needs you. Her words settled deep into his chest, easing the ache he hadn't admitted aloud. The days turned into weeks. Slowly, their home transformed. The guest room no longer felt temporary. It filled with Serena's belongings, with drawings Lyra made for her mother taped to the walls. The kitchen became a place of laughter, as Serena learned to cook with Daniel, sometimes burning meals, sometimes creating strange dishes that even Daniel had to admit were delicious. Neighbors noticed the change too. They saw the once lonely man walking through town now with not only his daughter but also the mysterious woman who stayed close by. Rumors spread, but Daniel didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt alive, surrounded by something he never thought he would have again. Family. And Lyra, caught between 2 worlds, no longer felt torn. She had both her parents with her, and in her heart, there was no choice to make. One quiet night, as stars glittered above, Lyra sat between Daniel and Serenia on the porch, leaning against them both. Her eyes closed, her breathing slowed, and she drifted into sleep. Daniel looked at Serenia. Their eyes met in the soft glow of starlight. No words were spoken, but the silence carried something strong, an understanding, a peace. They were no longer strangers bound by accident. They were a family imperfect, unusual, but real. And for Daniel, who had once thought life had nothing left to give, it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. The days that followed were heavy, filled with silence and unspoken questions. Daniel went about his chores quietly, his face hard, his heart heavy with the thought that every sunrise might be his last one with Lyra. Serenia stayed close to her daughter, but she also kept her distance from Daniel, as if giving him space. Lyra felt the weight of it all, more than anyone. She would sit at the table, fiddling with her food, her bright laughter gone. She stayed near Daniel during the day, but at night she often slipped into Serenia's arms, as if her heart was being pulled in two directions. Serenia watched carefully. She saw how Daniel cooked Lyra's favorite meals, even when he wasn't hungry himself. She saw how he bent down to listen to her stories, nodding patiently, as if each word was precious. She saw how his hands, rough from years of work, became gentle whenever they touched the girl's hair. One evening, Serenia walked into the kitchen and saw Lyra sitting at the table, crayons scattered around her. She was drawing again. Serenia bent down to look, and her chest tightened. On the paper was a picture of 3 figures, one tall man, one tall woman, and one small girl holding both their hands. Above it, clumsy letters spelled out the word family. Serenia touched the drawing softly. Her lips trembled, and her heart ached. She had searched the stars for years to find her daughter, yet here she was, staring at a truth she had not expected. Her daughter already had a family. That night, Serenia found Daniel on the porch, sharpening a tool. His face was set in stone, but his eyes were tired. She stood beside him, silent for a while before speaking. "You love her as if she were your own," she said softly. Daniel didn't look up. "That's because she is. In every way that matters." Serenia hesitated, her voice trembling. "Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't feel the bond between you two? You gave her years of love I could not. For that, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Daniel finally looked at her, his jaw tight. "Then don't repay me. Just don't take her away." The words hit Serenia like a stone. She opened her mouth but closed it again. She turned her gaze to the fields, to the place where Lyra had run so many times with laughter trailing behind her. "I thought when I found her, I would simply bring her home," Serenia whispered. "But now, I see she already is home, because of you." Daniel's hands stilled. He wanted to believe her, but fear still burned in him. He stared at the stars above. "She deserves her people, her real family." Serenia's voice broke. "And you don't see it. You are her people. You are part of her family now. She has 2 homes, mine and yours. She should not have to choose." At that moment, Lyra appeared in the doorway, her small voice carrying into the night. "I don't want to choose," she said, her eyes shining with tears. Daniel's heart cracked. He reached for her, lifting her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing softly. Serenia stepped closer, touching her daughter's hair. "No one will make you choose," Serenia whispered. "Not anymore." The 3 of them stood there on the porch, the silence broken only by the sound of the night insects, and the quiet sobs of the girl caught between 2 worlds. For the first time since she arrived, Serenia let herself smile through her tears. She looked at Daniel, not as a rival, not as someone she needed to fight, but as someone who had given her back the most precious thing in her life. "You raised her with love," she said again, her voice stronger now. "That makes you her father, and nothing will change that." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He could not speak. All he could do was hold Lyra tighter. his heart torn open by relief and sorrow. The choice had been made, not of one or the other, but of both, and, though none of them knew what the future would look like, one truth had finally been spoken into the world. Lyra was not going to lose either parent. Not now, not ever. The next morning, the farm was quieter than usual. The chickens clucked in the yard. The wind moved gently through the trees, but inside Daniel's house, the air was heavy. Lyra sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of milk she wasn't drinking. Her silver eyes kept shifting between Daniel and the woman who now sat across from him, Serenia. Daniel had made coffee, but he hadn't touched it. He sat stiffly, waiting, his hands pressed together. Finally, Serenia spoke. "My child was never meant to be here," she began softly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened. "Years ago, our ship was attacked in the dark between stars. We were forced to flee. In the chaos, I placed my daughter in an escape pod. It was the only way to save her. I searched for her across many worlds. I thought she was gone forever, until now." Her gaze fell on Lyra, and her lips trembled. "And now I find her here, alive, because of you." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to feel anger, but all he felt was fear of losing the girl, who had become his entire world. He leaned forward, his voice low. "She's been here for years. She's not just yours anymore. She's mine too." Lyra looked between them, confused, her small hands tightening around her cup. She did not understand everything, but she understood enough to feel the tension. Serenia's eyes softened. "I know," she whispered. "I see the bond you share. I am grateful to you more than words can say. But she is my daughter, Daniel, my blood, my heart." The words pierced him. He turned away, staring out the window at the fields. His throat ached, but he spoke anyway. "And what am I supposed to be, then? Just a stranger who kept her fed until you arrived?" His voice cracked against his will. "Do you know what she means to me? She calls me Dad. She drew her first picture for me. She cried in my arms when the thunder scared her. I was there for every moment, every single one." His voice had risen, and Lyra flinched. Daniel caught himself and went silent. His hands shook on the table. For a long moment, no one spoke. Serenia looked down, tears sliding down her face. Lyra stared at Daniel with wide, worried eyes. Finally, Daniel pushed his chair back and stood. "Excuse me," he muttered, walking out onto the porch. He needed the air. The evening fell slowly. Daniel sat outside long after the sun had gone, staring into the darkness of the fields. His mind was a storm. He remembered the night he found her, the way she clung to him when she was sick, the pride he felt the first time she called him Dad. How could he let that go? But another thought tortured him. She has a real mother, a real family. What if staying with me is holding her back? He heard footsteps behind him, small ones, Lyra. She slid onto the porch step beside him, her face lit faintly by the porch light. She sat quietly for a while before speaking. "Dad, I don't want to leave you." Her words were soft, but they cut deep. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He rested a hand on her shoulder. "Kiddo," he whispered, "sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes we don't get to keep the people we love most. We just do what's best for them." Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "But you're my dad." Daniel pulled her close, hugging her tightly. He buried his face in her hair, letting silent tears escape. "And you'll always be my daughter," he whispered. From the doorway, Serenia stood watching. Her heart ached at the sight. The bond between them was undeniable, stronger than blood, forged in love and years of care. She understood then that this was not a simple choice. The night was heavy with silence. Daniel sat on the porch, holding Lyra close, torn between his deepest fear and his deepest love. Serenia turned away, her own tears falling. The truth had been spoken, but the pain of it had only just begun. The summer evening began like any other. Daniel had just finished mending the old fence at the edge of the farm. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky with soft gold and orange. Lyra was chasing butterflies in the field, her laughter carrying in the warm air. For Daniel, moments like these felt like a blessing, ordinary yet precious. He thought to himself, maybe this is all I'll ever need. But then the sky changed. A streak of fire tore across the heavens, brighter and closer than any shooting star. It left a burning trail behind it, making the air hum with strange energy. Lyra froze, staring up with wide silver eyes. Daniel's chest tightened instantly. He had seen this before, years ago, the night that had brought Lyra into his life. His hands gripped the fence as he whispered, "No, not again." The streak vanished beyond the hills, and silence returned to the fields. But Daniel knew something or someone had come. The next morning, he found her. Daniel was heading to the barn when he noticed movement near the far side of the property. At first, he thought it was a stranger, a woman who had wandered too far. But as she stepped into the light, his breath caught in his throat. She was taller than any human woman he had ever seen, her body graceful yet strong. Her skin shimmered faintly, the same pale blue that Lyra's did in moonlight. Her hair flowed like silver smoke, moving even when the wind was still, and her eyes glowed like deep pools of starlight, the same as the little girl he had raised. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew instantly who she was, though she hadn't spoken a word. The woman stopped at the fence, her gaze fixed not on Daniel, but on the farmhouse beyond him. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with power and sorrow at once. "I am Sir," she said. Her accent was strange, her words careful, but clear. "I am her mother." Daniel's legs felt heavy, his throat was dry. He wanted to shout, to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but he couldn't. He didn't need proof, he saw the truth in her eyes. Lyra appeared in the doorway of the house just then. She had been watching, curious about the visitor. When her gaze met Serenia's, she froze. The air between them seemed to thicken, heavy with recognition. The girl's silver eyes widened, shining with confusion. Slowly, she stepped forward, one hesitant step after another. Serenia raised a trembling hand, her face breaking with emotion. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. "My child," Serenia whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel felt his chest twist, painfully. He stood there, helpless, as the daughter he had raised walked toward the woman who had given her life. Lyra stopped just a few feet away, torn between two worlds, her body shaking. She looked at Serenia, then at Daniel. "Dad." Her voice was small, uncertain. Daniel forced himself to smile, though his heart was breaking. "It's all right, kiddo, go on." Lyra reached out slowly, her small hand touching Serenia's. The moment their skin met, a soft glow rippled between them, like light traveling through water. Serenia let out a sob and pulled her daughter into her arms. For a long time, she just held her, whispering words in a language Daniel could not understand. He turned away, his fists clenched. Every instinct inside him screamed that this was wrong, that no one, not even this woman, had the right to take her away. But at the same time, another voice inside whispered that he had always known this day might come. When Serenia finally looked up, her eyes met his. They were filled with gratitude, sorrow, and something else, a deep understanding. "You have cared for her," Serenia said softly. "I can see it. You raised her with love when I could not." Daniel didn't answer. He simply nodded, though his jaw was tight. His heart ached with fear of what would come next. That night, the farmhouse felt different. Lyra barely ate her dinner, her mind full of questions she didn't know how to ask. Serenia stayed outside, watching the stars. Daniel sat on the porch long after Lyra had gone to bed, staring into the darkness. The woman had come from the same sky that had given him his daughter. She had come to take her back, and Daniel didn't know if his heart could survive losing her. The girl slept for almost 2 days. Daniel had carried her home that night, laid her carefully on the old sofa, and stayed beside her with a blanket and a bowl of water nearby. She had looked so fragile, shivering in her sleep, her silver eyes opening only for brief moments before closing again. He could not understand her words, but he understood her pain. When she finally woke, the house was quiet. Morning light spilled through the curtains, painting her face with soft gold. Daniel was sitting in a chair across from her, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. He had barely slept, too afraid she might vanish like a dream. She opened her eyes and looked around, startled. Her small hands clutched the blanket tightly. Daniel raised his palms slowly. "It's all right," he said in a gentle voice. "You're safe. No one will hurt you here." She blinked, not fully understanding, but she seemed to sense his kindness. Her body relaxed a little, though her eyes stayed wary. For days, communication was a puzzle. She spoke in broken sounds, strange syllables that meant nothing to Daniel. When he pointed to objects, cup, chair, window, she would repeat the words softly, sometimes with a curious tilt of her head. Slowly, she began to copy his language. Her voice was musical, but uncertain, like a bird learning its first song. Daniel decided to call her Lyra. The name came to him one night as he looked up at the stars. He didn't know if it was her real name, but when he said it to her, she smiled for the first time, and that was enough. Life changed quickly. Daniel found himself cooking more carefully, making simple meals she could eat. She seemed fascinated by bread, holding it in her hands as though it were a treasure. She laughed the first time he gave her a spoon of honey, her silver eyes lighting up with joy. He taught her to draw, handing her crayons left over from the past. She filled the pages with strange shapes, stars, and spirals he did not understand. Sometimes she drew pictures of 2 people, one tall, one small, holding hands. He didn't need words to know who they were. The townspeople noticed her too, of course. When they saw Daniel with a girl at the market, questions arose. "Where'd she come from?" they asked. Daniel would only smile and say, "She needed me." It was true enough, and people respected him enough not to push further. Yet, there were nights when fear crept into Daniel's heart. What if someone discovered the truth? What if people came to take her away? He would sit awake, watching her, sleep peacefully, her small chest rising and falling, and he would swear to himself, "No one will take her, not while I'm alive." Lyra grew quickly, faster than a normal child. Within months, her words became clearer. She learned to call him Dad, her voice soft but proud. The first time she said it, Daniel's eyes burned with tears. He had never expected to hear that word in his life again. They made routines. Every morning she helped him feed the chickens, her laughter echoing across the yard when the birds chased each other. In the evenings, they sat on the porch. Daniel told her stories, from old books, fairy tales, and legends. She listened with shining eyes, as though she had never heard such things before. But Lyra also had fears. She hated thunderstorms, hiding under the table whenever the sky cracked with lightning. Daniel would kneel beside her, wrapping his arms around her. "It's just noise, kiddo," he whispered. "Nothing can hurt you here." In those moments, she clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping his shirt, as though he were her anchor in a world too strange and heavy. And Daniel realized something he had not dared to admit before. He was no longer just protecting her. She was healing him. The loneliness that had weighed on him for years began to fade. The silence in the house was gone, replaced by laughter, questions, and the sound of tiny footsteps running through the halls. The man who thought his life had ended long ago had found a reason to live again. She was not his blood. She was not even of his world. But in every way that mattered, she was his daughter. And though he didn't know what the future would bring, Daniel knew one thing with certainty: he would never let her go. Daniel was a man who lived alone on the edge of a small town. His house was old, wooden, with creaking floors and a quiet porch where he often sat in the evenings. He had once shared it with his wife, but she had passed away many years ago. Since then, his life had been simple and lonely. Wake up early, take care of the small farm, fix broken things, and end the day with a cup of tea while staring at the stars. He didn't expect much from life anymore. He only wanted peace. But peace ended the night he heard the crash. It was late, and the sky was heavy with dark clouds. Daniel had just put away his tools and was getting ready for bed when the sound came. At first he thought it was thunder. A sharp, splitting roar shook the air, followed by a strange rumble that didn't feel natural. It was too close, too real. The windows rattled, and the ground seemed to tremble under his feet. He grabbed his coat and flashlight. Stepping outside, the air smelled of smoke and iron. Beyond the fields, deep in the woods, he saw a glowfinite, but unnatural, like burning metal. Something had fallen from the sky. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. A normal man would have called the police or the fire department. But something inside him, something he couldn't explain, pushed him forward. His boots sank into the wet ground as he moved quickly through the trees, branches scratching at his arms, his breath misting in the cold air. When he reached the clearing, his heart stopped. There, half buried in the earth, was a wreck. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't any machine he had ever seen. The surface was metallic but alive, shifting with faint pulses of light, like a heartbeat. Smoke hissed out from cracks, and the air shimmered with heat. Pieces were scattered everywhere, glowing like hot coals. Daniel's hand trembled as he raised the flashlight. That was when he heard it. A sound. Small, weak. Not the groan of metal, not the crack of fire. It was the sound of crying. He stepped closer, his boots crunching on broken fragments, and then he saw her. Lying against a piece of twisted hull was a child. At least, she looked like a child. Her body was small, thin, trembling. Her skin carried a faint blue tone, soft like pale moonlight. Her hair was dark but shimmered strangely in the firelight, and her eyes when they opened glowed faintly silver. She looked at him with fear, her lips parting, whispering sounds he couldn't understand. Her hands reached out weakly, shaking, as if begging for help. Daniel froze. His mind screamed to step back. This was not human. This was something from the stars, something that did not belong here. A sensible man would run, call the authorities, and stay far away. But Daniel was not just a sensible man. He was also a man who had once longed for a child, a man who had lost too much, a man whose heart still carried more kindness than fear. Slowly, he lowered his flashlight. He dropped to one knee beside her. Hey, it's okay," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. His voice shook with both fear and pity. "I won't hurt you." The girl tried to move, but her body was weak. He could see bruises, cuts, and a strange glowing wound near her shoulder. She was suffering. Without thinking further, Daniel took off his coat and wrapped it around her small frame. She flinched at first, but then sank into his warmth, her crying softening into whimpers. "Don't worry, kid," Daniel murmured, holding her gently. "You're safe now." When he carried her out of the wreckage, the forest seemed to close around them, silent except for the crackle of dying fire. Above, the sky was dark again, as if nothing had ever happened. But Daniel knew his life had changed forever. That night, he didn't bring home just a stranger. He brought home a daughter he never expected to have. And though he couldn't know it yet, the choice he made in that moment to pick her up instead of turning away would change not only his life, but the lives of many others, across both Earth and the stars.